Good morning, friends. It's Bob again, bringing you another reflection, a series of reflections on forgiveness and forgiving. And the reason why we're sticking with this is because over the years I have preached messages. I always make sure that I preach at least 2 messages a year on forgiveness and forgiving. But the reality is that lots of times what we do is we just sort of dabble around the edges. We don't put both feet in. We don't jump in every way. That we'll forgive when we're pressed to forgive, but then we kind of stay away from it. And so we live these lives that are kind of enmeshed in latent bitterness and different things like that. And when we do, as Jesus said in the parable of the unforgiving servant, we are actually placing ourselves in a cycle of torment, that God will give us over to what we actually are committed to. And in that, we are the ones that are responsible for that. But the Lord's like, look, if you want to stay bitter, you get to have the torment and everything that goes with that bitterness. And this is just not something that I want for anyone. God wants us to actually be in the space where we are experiencing the love and the joy and the freedom. And love, joy, and freedom are on the other side of forgiving and forgiveness. They're not on the bitterness side of forgiveness. They're on the releasing side of forgiveness. And so we actually need to get with the program. Now, on Sunday, I had Becky actually come up and tell us a little bit, because my wife's a therapist, as you know, and she's constantly working with people who actually have issues that are tied to bitterness and resentment. These things that happen, these affairs and these different kinds of dysfunctions and abuse and all kinds of things that people go through that leave them marked because they are wounded. And how do you get unwounded? Well, you can't unwound, you can only heal the wound. And part of the healing of the wound is actually forgiving. And when we don't forgive, we invite torment. So let's just think for a second. What are the things that are tormenting you in your life? And could some of those be actually tied to unforgiveness, failing to forgive, bitterness, resentment, those different kind of things? Think for a second. So I know that for myself, that sometimes I will just stew at night. If I've got somebody said something about me or hurt me or did something like that, I will just stew and stew and stew, and that will work its way into some insomnia for me. At least that's one of the things. And honestly, those of you that experience insomnia, it's torment. It's torment, plain and simple. But a lot of times what will end up happening is I'll be upset with someone. I won't forgive them. I won't have forgiven them. I'll be tossing and turning at night. I'll have a little anxiety spike because I'll think something about them. I'll have this anxiety spike and my body will break out in just a light sweat, and then I'm up. It's like, oh no. And I want to tell you, sleeplessness, at least for me, is torment. And that kind of thing will happen. And that's one of the kind of torments that I've experienced in that, where when I fail to forgive, I stew in my own juices. When I stew in my own juices, I don't sleep. That's part of the tormenting kind of a cycle. What about you? What are the tormenting things that your failure to forgive might be, kind of inviting in terms of torment in your own life? Sometimes it's physiological. Sometimes it's relational. But what are those things? We'll explore those a little bit more, but I wanted to kind of get us onto the playing field of talking about this some more. What is the torment that we are welcoming into our lives by failing to forgive? That's our reflection for today. Thanks so much for joining me. I love you. God bless you.